the things that I was kind of glad to see change, and kind of spread wider was kind of a bit of the sense of fun coming back into cocktail bars. Those bars that were craft cocktail bars didn't feel like they had to just be ultra serious all the time. And that was again, not we were not in any way like the kind of key kind of impetus for that, but it was that was to me one of the most wonderful things I saw kind of spread during that period.
Yeah. Well, this brings me to another question. I think you've actually just set it up quite nicely because we've mentioned this notion of, sort of the stiff, very formal, what we might call the speakeasy style cocktail bars that were popular early in the cocktail renaissance. And, when you walk into those places, obviously you're a student of atmosphere and ambiance, having needed to create it in different ways throughout all of your different properties over the years. And I think you'll agree with me that when you walk into one of these speakeasy style cocktail bars, it's meant to evoke a feeling of privilege. It's
Hmm.
sort of like, it's luxury. It's
Yeah,
not necessarily like a speakeasy actually was during
yeah,
Prohibition here in the US, perhaps. It is maybe a little bit more Victorian or something
yeah,
like that. It's
yeah.
yeah, very colonial, right?
Uh-huh.
And even to this day, I mean, some of the, take some of the amazing hotel cocktail bars in Asia. They're still like very heavily tied to their colonial roots. Um, so I see this notion of stiffness and privilege and sort of like luxury being here. And the implication, if we're saying, well, if you're going to go out and have great cocktails, you're going to go to one of these speakeasy style places, and it's going to be, somewhat formal. And
Hmm.
yes, you're going to get lectured, like Natasha and Karen said. Uh, on the other hand, if you want to go out and have a fun night out, well, okay, the drinks aren't going to be great. You're going to have to go to a lower class establishment, but you're probably going to go have a blast. And then, I spent a little bit of time in the UK, so I know that after one of those nights out, you get some nice kebab. Um, and that's a parallel type of logic, right? One
Yeah.
set of things up here, one set of things down here. They don't touch or intersect. And what I find interesting about some of the trends and the ideas and the executions that you've been describing so far is that you're trying to take those two things and kind of cross them in sort of what I would call a logical chiasmus. And whenever I see logic structures like that, and somebody who comes along and goes, well, what if we go like this and
Uh-huh.
completely kind of bend these things into one another, that's where I get really interested. So taking that notion of privilege in cocktails, because I think privilege and cocktails are intimately intertwined and perhaps maybe inextricable, but taking that notion of privilege in cocktails, how has that continued to inform your work? One obvious intersection seems to be the idea of sea level rise.
Yeah, I mean that's an amazing observation. I think it's a key point, and I think um, one of the things that certainly at the beginning that was a lot of the motivation was to try and smash those two worlds together and demonstrate that they're actually not a dichotomy. But I think what's kind of happened as we've been working is, luxury is a thing that evolves. It's not a static definition, and I think there has been a lot that's like shaped as a result of our world opening up. I think one of the key things around it was the kind of coverage and the education around kind of drinks. There was this desire to include more people into the world of it, and as a result of that, it's opened up spaces. It's opened up the people not only who work in the industry, but the people we end up talking to. And so it's ended up creating a much wider and larger landscape. And, that's exciting for us because it means that, I always talk about the fact that White Lion had to happen in London at that time. There's probably a handful of other places that it could have happened, but actually, from a legal point of view of what we were doing as work, London was one of the few places that enabled it. Um, but there were so many other bar ideas that I had, which would have been relevant then and not relevant now. And in the same way that as things are evolving, any work, any communication, any creative output needs to play to that audience. And yes, of course, it's trying to take people in a certain direction. It's not about that here and now. But I think as these things have evolved, as there's been different kind of spaces have opened up, different opportunities have opened up, and that's really informed the work that we do. I mean, I think you reference things like the kind of the sea level aspect of the work that we did in Amsterdam. You know, the relationship with a literal changing landscape, and the kind of things that are happening. And the wonderful thing about exploring a topic like that is it affects so much. I always think that, you know, food and drink is at the center of so many different aspects of human nature. But it touches, you know, when we were researching that kind of topic, we were everything from agriculture to geopolitics to engineering to biomimicry. All of these wonderful things were kind of coming into play, because it was such a like shifting space. It was created. It was a new area, and that allowed like us to do so much kind of interesting research. And the same thing is happening in kind of lots of different parts of the business. You know, we get to kind of explore different things. You know, with you talked about privilege with Seed Library, we're exploring where does our bias sit? Where are our knowledge sets like kind of restricted by our kind of upbringing, our kind of background of work? You know, all of the things that get covered in the canon of cocktails. You know, we're trying to like unlearn a lot of things and realize what we kind of, you know, what do we put as an echo chamber around ourselves? And I think it's really it's a wonderful time for the industry, and you know, this is what we're trying to do through the company is um, see where these kind of opportunities and bridges are. Who are the people that we can collaborate with? What are the spaces that we can learn from a very different perspective? Because things have shifted so much. We're in a really kind of, you know, they talk about different golden ages of the cocktail, but the world has never been more connected as it is now. And you know, the ability to you know, I always talk about the internet being one of, you know, humankind's greatest inventions because it connects us. You know, it's a repository for all knowledge, but it also allows us to go. It doesn't matter about location. We can talk to somebody on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and you know, learn something and have those interactions that help us maybe think differently on something. And I think that's where things have got really interesting for us at the moment. Is how can we you know, smash together different perspectives, different definitions that we previously could ever have learned from. And I think, you know, being able to work and operate out of different countries, different cultures has kind of added a kind of a further layer to that exploration that we can do.